Welcome to Orioles on the Verge. This is Zach Spedden, joined as always by Bob Phelan and Nick Stevens. And on tonight's episode, we welcome back Andy Kostka of the Baltimore Banner to look back at what was a very eventful first half for the Orioles, for better or worse. And we'll talk a little bit about what could come after the All-Star break and around the trade deadline. But first, as we like to do at the top of every episode, we want to welcome a new member to our Patreon community. And for that, I will turn it over to Bob.
Yeah, absolutely. We have a new AAA member. So it's probably like a waiver claim, pass through waivers. Crispy, welcome aboard. Your email is Rangers fan, but I guess you're an Orioles fan as well. So thank you for joining our Patreon community, and I hope you enjoy it.
Introduce our guest now. He is a beat writer over the Baltimore Banner covering the Orioles. He's been a guest of ours numerous times over the years, and we're happy to have him back on. He is Andy Kostka. Andy, how's it going?
I'm good, man. How are you?
Good. I have to imagine that this was not the season that you thought you would be covering coming into this year.
Yeah. Well, in a way, actually, no. Because, and I got a lot of heat for it at the time, and there's still a chance I'm incorrect. I picked the Orioles to miss the playoffs before the season started. In the Banner's official prediction post, I predicted them to finish about 2 games back of a wild card berth. So there's a potential I hit it nail on the head. But I'm not a victory lap kind of guy. It was I predicted it kind of in a way because everyone else predicted at the Banner that this would be a playoff team. And I was like, "Ooh, I'll be edgy and different. I'll be the hipster in the group." So I can't really claim that much credit. I just was the last one to fill out the predictions on the Banner, so I did something different. So I suppose yes, it is an unusual season in many ways. I didn't expect on May 17, that Brandon Hyde would be fired. If you had told me that at the end of last season. I'd be like, wow, things really went poorly, and boy, did it. It went poorly pretty quickly. And it's interesting enough is that since then, this team is an above 500 team under Tony Manzolino, and they've actually played pretty good baseball since May 20th or something. They're 21 and 13, I believe. Somebody can fact check me on that. But it's late May that they've been 21 and 13, and so they're playing really good baseball. Really good might be a little strong, but they're playing pretty good baseball. And what's interesting about that is it really is an indictment on how poorly they played for the first month and a half, 2 months. Because if this is they played good baseball now for over a month, with a record that's 8 games above 500 in the last month, or a little bit over a month. And they're still this many games out of the wild card race, 7.5 back. And I think there are 7 teams between them and that last wild card spot. So it really goes to show the difficulty and where this team is right now. It was a big hole to climb out of, and they still could, but we'll find out what July 31st brings.
Yeah, so I think rock bottom was 18 games under, like a week after Hyde was fired, and then now they're 9 games under 500. So, yeah, you're climbing out there. Does that mean that maybe they should have fired Hyde a little bit sooner so that, you don't quite get to that? Or, is that just completely unpredictable? There's no way to know, obviously, but what do you think?
It's really hard to know, except there was a right after the season finished, the 2024 season finished. I was talking with someone who is not in the organization but is in the baseball industry. If that is, I'm trying to keep him the name private, but so their opinion somewhat matters, but it's not an organizational voice. This person right after the season ended was saying that he really thought the O's should move on from Brandon Hyde. in the offseason and bring in a new guy that this person believed that, and he had a pretty intimate understanding of what was going on in the clubhouse from an outsider's perspective, but an understanding of hearing things. So I would say that it was definitely not unheard of in the baseball industry that maybe time was running out on Brandon Hyde. I was a little surprised that I guess I was less surprised about them firing Brandon Hyde than the Nationals firing Mike Rizzo yesterday. I'll say that, but that's not neither here nor there. It was probably a move that needed to be made because of where the team was at that point, and realizing that if you're going to have any chance at a comeback, which was slim chance at the time in May, and now here we are less than a month to the trade deadline, still a pretty slim chance, although it's possible. Weirder things have happened in life. So something had to be done. So I understand the reasoning of moving on from Brandon Hyde. It was a wake-up call for the clubhouse. And I think Tony Manzolino has done a good job under the circumstances of a little bit of eyes wide open and it's like a fire hose of information that he's having to deal with. But he's really focused on some of the right things. And part of that is aggressive base running and focusing on moving a runner over and kind of the little things that a minor league manager would preach. And at heart, that's what he is. He's a minor league manager who made the jump to a third base coach with the idea that maybe someday he would be a major league manager. Someday became in a capacity he didn't expect. But he's showing he's kind of preaching the minor league fundamental aspect of baseball. Doesn't always show up perfectly. I can name like 4 misplays at the plate in the last 2 weeks that you're like, just catch the ball or throw it somewhere near the plate. So it's not a silver bullet by any means, but it's definitely a better brand of baseball than we've seen.
Yeah, obviously from an outsider's perspective, it seemed like the energy was a little bit different before and after. But again, that's could have been from getting healthy, just from starting to win, maybe changes things. But when Mike Elias announced the firing, his tone was kind of like, it made it seem like maybe it was an ownership decision. Maybe if it was up to him, Hyde would have stayed on it. And I get that they came in together, obviously had a close relationship. What's your take on that?
He was very coy, Mike Elias, and whether it was a ownership decision, a him decision. I asked him twice, point blank, was it ownership or you? And both times, he said that it was ownership was involved in the decision, which to me is it's hard to really get a read. I don't want to necessarily make a sweeping claim when I don't necessarily know. I'll admit it, but it's at the very least ownership was involved in the decision. Whether that meant Elias went to them and said, "Hey, a change needs to be made," and they said execute it, or if they went to Elias and said something's got to be done, and he decided, okay, this is what has to be done. I'm not sure the intricacies of that dialogue. And we've requested David Rubenstein multiple times over the last 2 months and have been declined interview opportunities to this point. So we haven't had the chance to ask him exactly how it played out, but hopefully sometime soon.
Right on the heels of Hyde's firing, you wrote an article that probably had, from what I saw, the most in-depth account of what was going on in the Orioles clubhouse in the weeks leading up to his dismissal. Mm-hmm. Can you kind of walk our listeners through that a little bit and what your takeaways were from that report?
Yeah. I spoke with multiple players who were, granted anonymity to speak freely on, clubhouse atmosphere and kind of what the last week of his tenure was like. So there were multiple team meetings. It painted I think that one of the bigger storylines. I don't know if you can call a storyline when it's just Twitter perspective, but for better or for worse, something that had gained traction on Twitter was that, Brandon Hyde wasn't pushing this team, wasn't holding them to the fire a little bit, I guess is what you could summarize it as. Basically, in some of those team meetings in Anaheim, particularly, Brandon Hyde insinuated, is using the word, that one person said, that the league had begun to think the Orioles were soft, that they could not stand up to the pressure of being expected to win, expected to be a really good team, and then struggle, falling behind early in games and not being able to fight back, things of that nature, which was so different than the 2023 version, which is kind of interesting. I don't know exactly what changed. Maybe nothing, and just was injuries and things like that. We could go back and forth all night on the reasoning there. But I think from that story, it showed that, Brandon Hyde was trying to light a fire under this group. And maybe he realized that time was running short, or that pressure was mounting, because that was the most outspoken he had been in from at least what I've heard, kind of chewing his players out, in Anaheim. And then there was there was a players only meeting the Friday night right before he was fired. I believe that was May 16. They lose to the Washington Nationals. And apparently that was the final straw from an ownership / general manager perspective, because Saturday morning, he was fired, along with Tim Cousins, the bullpen coach and catching instructor. So I don't know if that answered exactly the question. Happy to, if there's anything else I should bring up from that, happy to, if you jog my memory, that'd be great. I wrote it like 2 months ago. I kind of forget, I'll be honest.
That covers it. And just looking at what you've seen from this team in the last few weeks, you touched on what Tony Manzolino has brought to the table as a manager, which is more of that emphasis and fundamentals. And while that doesn't always come across in their play necessarily, they have played better. Do you think that a lot of that just owes to the team simply getting healthy, or is there a bigger change going on that has led to them being successful?
Yeah, it's twofold. I think the first one is the team is healthier. I guess you could say they're healthier because as we sit at this exact moment, they don't have Adley Rutschman, and they don't have Gary Sanchez, and they don't have Maverick Hanley. Imagine I'll say his name third. If we thought that in the winter, we'd be like, what the heck's going on? Zach Eflin's on the injured list. So I say healthy. Maybe it's not entirely true. They're still dealing with plenty of injuries. It's just been a variety of injuries. Colton Cowser missed 2 months, and Jordan Westberg missed a lot of time, and Ryan Mountcastle is still absent. Tyler O'Neill just returned from a lengthy absence. So it's a revolving door of health. Maybe, for the last month, some key players were on the diamond at the same time together, which helped. But I think, I wrote last week a story about the most noticeable difference under Tony Manzolino has been how aggressive the base running has been. And you just look at it under Brandon Hyde. I remember in the spring, the big storyline in spring was, hey, we're gonna get running, we're gonna steal a lot of bases, we're gonna get moving. It was a really bad base running team through May 16. Their I don't know what you'd call it. They're like base running grade or whatever that Fangraphs gives teams was a negative 2.8 for the first month and a half of the season, which is very much below average. Was one of the worst in baseball. And their steals, they were tied for 25th in steals in the first 40 some games of the year. Now in the month and whatever we are, almost 2 months at this point, month and a half, a little bit more than a month and a half under Tony Manzolino. This has been one of the best base running teams, but based on that Fangraphs grade, fifth in baseball, I believe is their positive 1.8 or thereabout. Last time I checked last week, and they have more stolen bases. They're near the top in the league in stolen bases in this time frame. So I think that's maybe the most noticeable thing. And I was talking to Jackson Holliday about this, and he said that one of the first things Tony Manzolino told them all was he's taking the brakes off and basically wants everyone to be as aggressive as possible on the bases, and wants to force the opponent to make a play, because a lot of times, and these are major leaguers, they can make plays, but if it's a bang bang play, you don't know what happens. We've seen bang bang plays go against the O's plenty so far this year, because teams don't make the play that you'd expect a major leaguer to make. So he has really advised Anthony Sanders at first base to send guys all the time. He lets Buck Britton send guys, aggressive sends from third base. And we've seen a lot of those work out really well. Not always, maybe if they were out, we would say like, ooh, I don't think that's a good send. But they are pushing the issue, because something Jackson Holliday said, actually, that didn't make the story, but he mentioned how they were talking about how, if there's like, say there's 2 outs and somebody, it's a single right at the left fielder, one hops to the left fielder, guy on second. They're willing to send a guy home because the chances in Major League Baseball with 2 outs to have consecutive singles is really low. So to score that guy from third, runners in the corners, whatever, with 2 outs, to score the guy from third then with a single, it's not great odds. So they're just maximizing their odds of scoring runs by pressing the issue. And, I've realized that there's going to be a certain point where somebody's going to be thrown out in a big situation, and we're all going to talk about how he's too aggressive. But I would personally, like, just as a person who likes to watch baseball, man, it's fun to see people just running everywhere. It's good stuff. And you think about it, if your team is pushing the issue on the base pass, if you're creating havoc on the base pass, pitchers naturally are going to throw more fastballs because they want to help their catchers, help their timing to the plate. Number 2, help their catchers. If you're throwing off-speed junk in the dirt, you don't have any chance to throw out a runner at second. You're going to see more fastballs. That's only going to help the batters. This team has historically done well against fastballs, like most teams. It's not a trivia. I mean, most teams do well against fastballs, unless you're like against the Brewers. That kid that just got caught up by the Brewers, he's crazy, whatever his name is. His fastball no one's hitting, but yeah, I'd like to see the aggressiveness. I mean, why not? It's been fun to watch, and until he feels, and he being Tony Manzolino, until he feels the need to kind of rein somebody back in, he's not going to. And so that's been the biggest change. In my roundabout answer, that's been the biggest.
Like it. I would say if the kids in Aberdeen could hit a little bit more, you'd really love watching Aberdeen. And these guys, they don't get on base very often, but they're stealing 30, 40 bags already this year. Awesome. Let's talk about the pitching, and you talk about like that, are we actually getting healthier thing? You see Keegan Aiken go on the IL here recently, Povich with the hip. You mentioned Eflin back on the IL. It seems like injuries starting to pile up once again. Tomoyuki Sagano kind of struggling his last couple of outings, but the big bright spot, I think, to a lot of people's shock, has been Trevor Rogers. He's been fantastic. Like 2 outs away, I think, from 4 or 5 quality starts already, and just 6 starts, something like that. Is this breakout? Is this for real? Are we fully buying into the Trevor Rogers resurgence now?
Did maybe everybody that rushed to say it was a terrible trade maybe eat their words a little bit so far?
Well, we'll find out. I think trades are so. I will answer this in multiple ways. I'm really sorry. So I promise I will answer about Trevor Rogers in a second, but I'm going to first talk about trades and judging trades, because I have 2 thoughts here, and these 2 thoughts are a little bit contradictory in a way, but I want to try to enunciate it in a way that hopefully listeners understand. Basically, the trade for Trevor Rogers can be looked at as both good and bad. and it depends on what lens you take. So if you take it as in 2024, Mike Elias was trying to bolster a starting rotation and help this team win in the playoffs. If that is the lens you look through, and the point was, number one, you're getting a guy that has multiple years of control, but really you're trying to bolster the 2024 team. It was a complete abject disaster, especially when Connor Norby could have been incredibly important for that team because of the infield injuries. So if you look at through that lens, I don't really care what everything else brings. It's an abject disaster. If you look at it from a longer term point of view, in which case 6 starts this year don't necessarily tell the story. We would have to judge this in 10 years, maybe. Look down the line. If you look in 10 years and say, oh, Trevor Rogers, from 2025 onward, for the 3 years he was in Baltimore, had a 3.30 ERA. Those 3 years, you're thinking, oh, that's pretty good. That was actually a good trade. Of course, some of it depends on what Kyle Stowers does. He just made, congratulations to him, making an all-star team. Maybe that news was a little bit easier to swallow for Orioles fans because of what Trevor Rogers has done this year. But it's never as simple as saying it's a bad trade because of X. It's a good trade because of X. It's something that is going to be, it's something that's always going to be a bit of a something that's open to debate, which is very fun. That's why love sports. You can debate anything all the time. Now, to talk about Trevor Rogers, is this legit? I would like to think so. It looks better. I was looking at his arm slot data, and his arm slot is closer to what it was in 21, which obviously was a good year for him. I asked him about, was that a conscious change? Actually, no. He had no idea what his arm slot was. He had no idea. What he said about that was that his lower half is actually moving more efficiently, and his drive leg and everything feels stronger. His base is better, which is allowing his upper half to move in a more complementary way. So it is like last year when he was struggling a little bit, it really started with the lower half, which is something that I think so many times, we always think about the arm, but to throw 100 miles per hour and all these guys have to, it starts with your foot, basically. Your toe is what leads to everything. And then it drives up from the ground up. So he feels better in that manner. I think if he can, the velocity has been good, but we also saw Sunday when his velocity was more back to what it was, that he still had good results, which is a great sign. That's one of the most positives. If he can't, like if he's throwing 95, you feel really good about it. And obviously when he's doing that, things have been good this year. When he's throwing 93 like he did Sunday and below, and he still can command pitches the way he did and get outs the way he did, you're going to feel like, hey, maybe this is a guy that even on a bad day, he can grind through a lineup that has really been slumping, to be honest. I mean, Atlanta has not been a good team, so it's looking through that lens a little bit. But I do think this is more of what he can be. I don't think he is going to finish the year with a 1 ERA. So we can assume there's going to be a blow-up outing at some point. But overall, I think it's going to be pretty good. I would like to John Mioli for the Banner wrote a great article kind of about the attack plan that Baltimore had when they sent him back down to AAA. It was really detailed. Jay Calvin-Meyer from the Baltimore Sun also wrote a Trevor Rogers story that if people have not read either of those, I highly recommend whichever one you have subscription for, or both. Do whatever you need. But both are very good articles, and they seem to hint that this is more than just a flash in the pan.
Yeah, from my outside perspective, it seems like confidence is up because velocity is up. He's got a new sweepier slider, which seems to be devastating to lefties. And then I think when your confidence is up, you feel better about throwing it in and around the zone, and it kind of just builds up from there. But yeah, obviously he's not going to keep up this exact performance, but got to feel good about him at least being around for next year in the middle to back end of a rotation.
Yeah. Yeah. And I would agree. I mean, this is not your ace, and you cannot go into 2026 thinking our rotation is going to be Grayson Rodriguez, Trevor Rogers, Kyle Bradish, and we're going to win a World Series. You just can't do that. Like, it's not possible. You're going to have to go get somebody. If that person is an extension for Eflin, which based on the last month and a half, I'm not sure you necessarily feel that way compared to how you did maybe the first month of the season. It's he, I would say, at best a number 3, preferably back end guy, which is totally fine. I mean, you need somebody, you need people like that are consistent. I mean, look at Dean Kramer, what he's been for basically his entire career in Baltimore has been a 4 or 5. And I would argue that he has been one of their better pitchers over the last 3-4 years, all things considered. So, able to stay on the mound and things like that, durability, and that there's a lot that goes into health because the rest of the pitching staff has not been able to stay healthy. I mean, you mentioned with Keegan Aiken on the IL, Cade Povich, his rehab assignment rather, has hit basically been paused because of hip discomfort. You have Eflin for the second time this season on the IL. It's not rosy. And Sugano, I think this start on Wednesday, he starts against the Mets. It's an incredibly important start. It's his last one before the end of the first half, and he's the league has both maybe figured him out a little bit, and at the same time, his command has just been really off. I think if he got back to better command, especially with his off-speed pitches, maybe he'd find more success. But it's a big start for him on Wednesday because it's been a tough month plus for him at this point.
Yeah. And I know Danielle just wrote a piece, I think it was this morning, about the look into Kyle Bradish and his kind of journey. We got in the recent updates too on Grayson. What's the latest with Tyler Wells though? Talking about those 3 guys coming back soon. I've probably missed that, but what do we know about Wells and his recovery right now?
Yeah, we knew 2 weeks ago. We heard he was a week behind Bradish in facing live hitters, and Bradish has faced live hitters now in Florida, I believe. So I imagine Wells is nearing that. But I'll have to ask him tomorrow. Why don't I do that? I'll do that. Yeah, I don't know the exact answer. I'll do that tomorrow.
Yeah. So do you think, as bad as this season had started and is still technically going, do you think that the core of the team is good enough to rebound in 2026 if the offseason goes right? I feel like have all 5 of Adley, Gunnar, Jackson, Colton, and Jordan been healthy at the same time this year? I'm not even sure, but do you think those 5 guys plus, you hopefully Kobe Mayo, Samuel Basayo come up in the next few months to year? Do you think the core is still there to be contenders in the future?
Yes, I tentatively at this exact moment think so. To really feel good about it, I need to see a strong year from Kobe Mayo. We've seen the past month has been good when he gets playing time, but I think what I would like to see is him receive every day. Basically, all right, let me start this way. I want to start over. I think the trade deadline at this point, it would be prudent for Mike Elias to sell certain pieces, but this is not a rip down and begin over. He knows that this is a team that can compete for 2026. At least they want to believe that. What that means is I would imagine Ryan O'Hearn is your most coveted piece to trade. He's on an expiring contract. Doesn't mean you can't sign him back this offseason. That's always an option. But definitely I would assume you'd want to trade him. And you could trade Ramon Laureano. I know he has a club option, but that only increases his value. I'm looking at a team like Philadelphia that needs a right-handed outfielder. Maybe they have another Gregory Soto or Sir Anthony Dominguez sitting around that they want to give up. But you could, I'd imagine, those two could be options, and Cedric Mullins is an option, although I, personally don't see the desire as much to trade a Cedric Mullins because there's not a like for like replacement. And I know Colton Cowser can play center field. He plays it well. I still would prefer him in left field based on his outs above average in left field compared to center field, and its sample size is a part of that. So I acknowledge that he hasn't played enough in center to potentially have a full data set to examine. But they're Bradfield, Honeycutt, they're not anywhere near ready at this point to take over center field this year, let alone probably next year. I don't think even Bradfield would be ready for next year. So I would personally probably vote, if I was in that front office, to try to extend Mullins in a short-term capacity. The bigger question is, would Mullins want a short-term extension? That is the big thing. So if you realize he doesn't, maybe a trade makes more sense. Needless to say, assuming that we're going to, for the sake of my argument here, we're going to assume that Ramon Laureano and Ryan O'Hearn are out the door. I don't necessarily think that is a terrible outcome. It doesn't even preclude this team from still attempting to get a wild card spot this year, because you have two guys in AAA who are probably deserving of an opportunity to show if they can be parts of the 2026 roster, Dylan Beavers and Samuel Basayo. I would argue that Beavers is the more ready player than Basayo at this exact moment, without any doubt in my mind. He is, just because of Basayo's, there's questions so far about his game calling ability and working with a pitching staff. He's only 20. This is catchers. That's a hard position to get a hold of. If you bring him up though, in August 1st, after if O'Hearn is traded, again, this is all just BS conjecture on my part. But if you brought him up and you had him maybe 1 or 2 games a week behind the dish, some DH, some first base, I think that's a good way to get his bat into the lineup. And the bat seems ready to make the jump, even if there's some questions about the defense. Beavers, I think, could really play a lot in the outfield, and the guy's getting on base at an incredibly high level. So I would like to see if he could. He's going to struggle. Everyone is going to struggle when they first come up to major leagues. We've seen it for almost every prospect. Just the difference in pitching is, I think, especially in the last couple of years, the gap has widened between AAA and major leagues. Probably because, now I'm just getting off topic. I'm sorry. I think the gap is widened, number one, because there are fewer minor league spots, and there's probably more focus on prospects than like quad A guys in systems. So there's fewer quad A, pitchers in AAA.
Not to mention the pitching injuries.
Pitching injuries. That's a third. I didn't even mention that one. That's a good one. I was going to say analytics. Teams have analytics at the minor league level that they are more willing, maybe not the Orioles, but some teams are more willing to rapidly elevate a pitcher because they see that analytically they think they can play at the major league level. So they're more willing to rapidly rise a guy. So you're not having them seasoning in AAA for a lot longer. Complete aside, sorry. I think given that, if you bring up those two, you see if they can be legitimate parts of 2026, and you don't necessarily have to go sign, another guy this offseason or trade for somebody. You have them in-house, ready to go. But yeah, I think I would my point right now would be that even if this team gets within a couple games of 500, I would still lean toward trading Ryan O'Hearn, simply because his value is really high. There is mathematically not a great chance at a wild card berth, and you have Dylan Beavers and a Samuel Basayo, depending on who you want to give the opportunity to. You can give them major league seasoning when there's less pressure on them. You're not in a title race. So yeah.
Good answer. My look the past month or so has been I think you could trade everybody that's on an expiring contract, or almost everybody, and still technically continue to contend for, that dark horse, long shot of a wild card spot, because of, like you said, you got Beavers, maybe Judd Fabian, Samuel Basayo on the offensive side. And obviously you cannot count on this, but if Grayson, Bradish, Wells come back and can pitch well, and if Brandon Young can get acclimated, I think, you're at least a similar talent level team right now. But let's change your mind. What would it take and obviously you can buy and sell at the same time, buy for beyond 2025, sell for maybe just this year, but what would it take over the next 3 weeks or whatever it is before the deadline to say Orioles, they are right in the thick of it. They need to just forgo smartness and just go for it and try to grab that last wild card spot? What would their record need to be on July 30th?
I care less about the record, and I care more about games back in wild card and how many teams are between them and that third wild card spot. So if I'm allowed to change the parameters, if you'll indulge me, I'll do that. I would say you'd have to be 3 games back with fewer than 3 teams, between you and a wild card, because that means you have 2 months for a sprint to the postseason. You have to make up 3 games, and you're assuming that those other teams are not rolling over. This is those teams are going to be in the same spot, probably buying at the deadline, potentially going on great runs themselves. So it still would be no guarantee, but at least 3 games. You have to gain 1.5 games of ground over 2 months. I think you could do that. You can stand pat, or even do a combination of buy sell, where maybe you pick up a swing man type to help in long relief, because you really don't have a long reliever. Like, you don't have one. I think that's like, this team could really use a long reliever right now, instead of Luis Vasquez. So yeah, let's say three games back of the wild card, which means they have to gain 4 games between now and July 31st, which they're not going to do. So I don't think it's going to be possible. Sorry.
No, I was just gonna say, they go on this run, they win a couple of games, you start to feel good. You just look at like their record, like 10 games under 500. It's first week of July. All right. And I think actually Paul Mancano, your colleague at the Banner, had a good tweet. I think this was yesterday. I had to find it again. The O's are actually closer to the last wildcard spot 2 weeks ago. They've actually lost ground in the playoff race despite playing better baseball recently. So there's always that. I know, listening to him and John Mioli in their show and John coming on our show, there's always like those punches right to the gut, the realizations of like, yeah, this is going to be incredibly difficult, and why no one in MLB history has been able to overcome what the Orioles would have to come if they were to make the playoffs. So
exactly. Yeah. So it's part of. I keep pointing out to people that there are 7 teams. If you include the Mariners, who are in that third wild card spot right now, you'd have to jump 7 teams to be in the playoffs right now. So you're banking on 7 teams in the next 3 months. It's possible, but you're banging on 7 teams to all forget how to play baseball while you suddenly go on a tear, even at a better pace than they have been going right now. Because 21-13, whatever that is, it's like a 630 winning percentage. If I'm doing it right, something along those lines, you'd probably have to be at a 640, 650 to actually make it up. So is it possible? Yeah, it'd be fun to cover. I'm sure it would. I mean, it would be great. I'm sure there'd be a lot of energy. Think of all the storylines. Think of all the subscriptions for the Banner. This would be great for the newspaper. Think about all the new subs. Welcome, Chris B, new sub. But I don't. Yeah, it is worse than a small window. It is. We're looking at a really small chance here.
And with that, now we will go into our final segment of the show. Last call brought to you by Checker Spot Brewing. Located at 1421 Ridgely Street, Checker Spot is not far from Oriole Park at Camden Yards, making it the perfect place for a pre- or post-game drink. And when you're at the ballpark this year, be sure to check out the beer stand behind home plate for one of Checker Spot's signature beers, The Bird is the Word. And our question here in this last call segment, touches on the trade deadline. And Andy, you've given, I think, your thoughts on some of these players already, but still going to throw this out there. Regardless of what happens between now and July 31st, will anyone out of a group of Cedric Mullins, Tomoyuki Sugano, Ryan O'Hearn, Charlie Morton, or relievers Sir Anthony Dominguez and Gregory Soto still be with the team after the deadline?
First, I will say Checker Spot Brewing is awesome. If no one's been there, definitely go. It's a great spot. They've been, great beer. Second, your question is a doozy of one. Oh, man. I would say that, so the five are O'Hearn, Mullins, Sugano, Morton, and Dominguez, correct?
Correct.
Plus
and
Soto.
Gregory Soto, too.
And Gregory Soto. Okay, and Gregory Soto. So six. Yeah, I think there will be two of those guys at least still on the roster. That would be, even though I think, Mullins can be such a streaky hitter as we've seen in his career. I think just the fact that he's a center fielder and there are few center fielders who really have potentially plus value at the plate, teams will be interested in his services. So even though I would argue toward keeping him personally, for reasons I said previously, I think the market is going to be high enough on him that it might force Baltimore's hand. Ryan O'Hearn, I imagine that the market on him is going to be so great that you can get a lot of value back. He's definitely the most coveted player on the Orioles right now that's not named Sir Anthony Dominguez, because I think Dominguez might actually be the most coveted at this moment. That splitter is nasty. So I definitely, so Dominguez could be gone. Gregory Soto's had a pretty good year as well, and he's a lefty reliever, which always helps value. Guys need lefties, so he could be gone. Charlie Morton, I think, stays because they need someone to pitch these innings. You need somebody. I think unless
Contreras, maybe.
yeah, he could. Chase McDermott as well. He's healthy again, I believe. I believe he is. I think unless Baltimore was willing to pay the remainder of Morton's contract, I don't think as many teams would be as excited to pick up, his deal, even though that it's only a fraction of the $15 million. Based on what if he turns into a pumpkin again, and it just this doesn't go well compared to the last month and a half that he's been. Honestly, the last month and a half, he's been really good, super good, better than almost ever. Maybe I'll talk myself into it because it's not that much money. No, I'm going to stick with it. I'm sticking with it. Charlie Morton's still on the team. And then what was the last one?
Sugano.
Sugano stays on the team because his value is tanked.
Yeah, I personally think Sugano's the only one that has a chance of staying. And because, he gets you eyeballs in Japan, and that's a market you're still trying to grow, even if, he's not been performing as well. So, yeah, I think Sugano's the only one that's still here.
That's fair. I find it so funny, and this is I'm just riffing, so I apologize. But I find it so fascinating that if you had asked me the same question a month and a half ago, I would have said Zach Eflin's gone, Sugano is gone. Morton, nobody is going to want Charlie Morton. And here we are on July 7th talking about Charlie Morton being lights out, Eflin being on the injury list for a second time, Sugano not pitching to the standard he had for the first 12 starts of his career, or whatever the number, about that. It's funny how baseball can change. I mean, it's such a, and maybe this is partly just my fault. Baseball is both such a marathon, yet it is also a sprint at the same time. You have to sprint the marathon. And based on that, I'm taking 5 starts in a row from Sugano as not being great and saying, oh, his value's gone. And it's only 5 starts. If you look at the 18 or 17 starts he's had, it's he's been good. I think the worry is that the long ball, he has 19 long balls against him in 17 starts. That's a worry. Yeah, but it's all about form at the deadline. You feel like, it's all about form. And so it's kind of a funny thing that baseball can, you constantly are telling yourself, like, don't think about streaks and who's hot, because it can flip in a second. Yet at the trade deadline, a lot of times it comes down to that.
It's true.
So I'm just throwing that in the wind, and hopefully somebody understands it.
Dude, even game to game, I've stopped. I don't want to talk about a pitcher performance. I don't want to tweet about it. I don't want to post on any social media about a pitcher performance, because as soon as you do, you feel good. He's given up 3 home runs and 6 earned runs within 5 minutes. So
that's why whenever I have a pitcher story, I'm like, I need to post this before he next pitches, because this could all blow. Like, I remember I was writing this story about Brian Baker, who, shout out Brian Baker, has been sneakily one of the better relievers in baseball this year.
Maybe a trade chip?
Maybe a trade chip, although he still has team control. Sure. But maybe a trade chip. In spring training, I'm sorry, I'm wasting your time. You can keep going.
No. This is gold.
I was in spring training. I was writing about his new improved changeup, and I had this like big story on it. I had 1,200 words written. I was like, this is good. It was going the next morning. And I was sitting there in the Ed Smith Stadium press box. I'm like, all right, I just finished it, turned it into my editors. I was like, all I need now is for Brian Baker to not pitch in this baseball game, or pitch and pitch well. That's good too. Like, you can pitch well and it's fine. Of course, he comes in, he gives up 2 homers, and we have to hold that Brian Baker story for a week. And even when we published it, people were like, "Oh, you must have missed the 2 homers he gave up." He gave up against fastballs. I made sure that was point 2. It wasn't even against the changeup. And it's like, it's doggone spring training, but I had to hold that story for a flipping week because just bad timing. Bad timing. Oh man, I didn't tell Brian about that, but hopefully he's listening and can say, "Oh, my bad, bro. My bad."
Previous
he doesn't care. He doesn't need to care. But it's one of those funny things that, like, sometimes you're really hoping that somebody doesn't pitch that night if you have a story about a reliever. Those are some of the most stressful. Like I remember Matt Wyrick from The Sun had a Felix Bautista story supposed to publish about probably 2 or 3 weeks ago. We're on the road in Sacramento. No, he wasn't in Sacramento. Seattle. We're in Seattle. And Bautista walks 2 guys, and he's on the edge of his seat. Like, if he blows this save, I don't know what I'm going to do for the morning. Like, my story's done. Like, I don't know what I'm going to do. Bautista closed it out. Everything turned out fine. We went to a bar. It was great. But it was a nerve-wracking moment for Matt there. And I've been there so many times where you're just like, you have everything set, but everything rides on that one game, and you don't know what's going to happen. And suddenly at midnight, you don't know what you're publishing for the next day. So it's crazy. All right, with that, I'll let you guys.
Hey, remember Sir Anthony Dominguez gave up like 20 home runs in spring training, and now he's like one of our most valuable trade chips.
Well, I mean, it's true. It's spring training is. I love spring training sometimes because, like, I remember. Sorry, I'm going again. I remember the first bullpen that Sugano threw. We're all posting video of it on Twitter, Blue Sky, what have you, and everyone's like, "This guy looks amazing," and it's like, we have no idea. There's a plastic figurine standing in the right-handed batter's box, and we have no idea what it looks like. Like, yeah, he threw it to the catcher, man. Yeah, that's what you do. It's just like, we sometimes, especially in spring training, freak out about results and little things like that, and it means nothing. I think that's the takeaway from this show, is that none of us actually know that much about it. So
totally fair.
But it's fun to talk about anyway. So hopefully people enjoy it. Hopefully people. All right,
Andy, we always enjoy having you on. Before you go, though, let our readers know why they should subscribe to the banner. I think they already know, but give them a good reminder.
Oh, and preview your next article because I think our listeners will be very excited about it.
Yeah, tomorrow morning, I have a story on Nate George coming out about the 16th round pick from 2024. He is playing and looking like a first rounder, which is big praise, but Colin Woody from Delmarva said it, not me, so I'll quote him on that, and I think He's of course hyping up his guy, but he has a point. I mean, this 19-year-old outfielder is incredibly fast, but is also showing gap to gap power. When he hits it in the gap, man, he's off to the races. He has 4 triples already in 20 games at the low A level. He has 13 stolen bases in 20 games. He said one of the things he wants to work on is his base running, and I was just thinking like, oh, okay, that's interesting. You're stealing a lot of bases already, but yeah, it's kind of about how the heck Baltimore found him, how he was undiscovered, and how he's has a little bit of a chip on his shoulder about the 16th round thing, but is handling it super well, and is basically not letting himself be defined by the fact he was a 16th rounder. So it would mean a lot if you guys read it. That'd be great. Anyway, you can follow me on Twitter at AF Kostka. Good luck spelling that. And then Blue Sky, I think it's the same handle. I'm more active on Blue Sky at this moment, but you never know. I might switch back over. Or subscribe to the banner. You can also do that. That's great.
Yeah, I do that. It's worth it.
I hope it's good.
It is.
That's good. That's good. Well, thank you, man. Okay.
And we really enjoy the coverage from you and the team over there. So it's, but Andy, thanks for coming on.
Yeah, sounds good, guys. I appreciate it. I will actually leave this time. All right, catch you. Bye.
Thanks, man. Good stuff.
That does it for this episode. We will be back later this week to take your questions as part of the latest listener mailbag. In the meantime, you can check us out on many social media channels, including Facebook, Instagram, Threads, X, TikTok, Twitch, YouTube, and Blue Sky. We're also over at Substack, OriolesOnTheVerge.substack.com. And while you're browsing around the internet, be sure to head over to Patreon and sign up to become a member of our community today at the $3, $5, or $10 levels and get bonus weekly shows from Bob, Nick, and myself, as well as monthly updates to our top 50 prospects list. In fact, our July list was just posted last week, and we have a lot of good content in that with a lot of movement. And, of course, we'll have more updates around the time of the draft. For Bob Phelan and Nick Stevens, this is Zach Spedden. You've been listening to Orioles on the Verge, part of the Believe Podcast Network.